Going one.
This is Garrett Hart for Rock and Recovery, and with me is Nicole W. She is the owner-operator of Nikki's House in Warren, Ohio. Nicole, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Let's talk about Nikki's House. What is it? How did it get started? What's going on?
Nikki's House is the recovery house for women. We have 8 beds. It's for women recovering from alcohol and drugs. We provide a supportive environment where they can live in a sober atmosphere, but also learn how to socialize and interact with the world in a sober manner, which is something that is often very difficult for people in recovery. First thing that sometimes people think when they first get sober is, my life has ended and all fun has ended. And so I try to show the girls how they can have fun without drugs and alcohol.
So this is life after treatment.
Yes.
For women.
Yes.
And is there an age group specific, or is this women of any age that can be a part of this?
It's for women of any age who can be a part of it. We mostly have women who are in their 20s, 30s, 40s, some in their 50s, but we do not have an age limit at all.
And talking about a sober environment, realizing that these people are now part of a new group, that they are avoiding people, places, and things that could be disruptive to their recovery. What are some of the tactics that you use in communicating and sharing with these folks to help find their way in recovery?
Well, the first thing that we try to do is get everyone to understand that you can socialize without drugs and alcohol. And that, like I said, that's a big thing, because even in my own journey, I knew that I was an alcoholic about 20 years before I got sober. But I said I wasn't going to do anything about it because I didn't want all fun to end. I thought that, I was, at the time I was 21 years old, and I said, I'll do something about it when I get 40. Actually, I was wrong. I was 10 years later I got sober. And ironically, on my 40th birthday, I already had 8 years of sobriety. So the important thing that I try to teach them to do is how to have a schedule, a regimen, little things like making up your bed in the morning, having chores in the morning, organizing your day, organizing your life. So those are the tactical things that I try to teach them to do. And then also the social things. We have dinner together, we'll order a pizza together, we'll have a movie night together. There's picnics that go on. Any events that are related to sobriety, I encourage them to go and participate in them so that they realize that their life can still be very rich and full and exciting, and even more so exciting without having drugs and alcohol involved. We also have a spirituality component. We are not of any sect, denomination, or religion, but we're very spiritual in the sense that I have representation of all of the religions around the house. So there's representation of saints from the Bible, from the Quran, from the Torah, from Buddhism, from Hinduism to Native American, and even some self-help authors. And every morning we get up, we do a daily reading. And after we do the daily reading, we do a meditation, and then we say a prayer. So it's kind of getting everyone in a position to start thinking about their day ahead and kind of going into their day with a sense of clarity as to what's going to happen and how they're going to manage their day.
And how important is the interaction among the others in the group as their individual journey into a clean and sober life, and an awareness that that's okay, as well as their interaction with each other in that setting?
Well, it's important because this is very much a we process. It's not a me process. If any of us could have stayed sober individually on our own, we would have been able to do so. The will was there for most of us to want to quit drinking or wanting to quit drugs. So the support that they give each other is, very blunt support, quite honestly, where they give each other feedback. If they're having a challenge in one way or another, they address that challenge. and tell the other members of the group. And the women provide support to each other. They encourage each other. They help each other go to meetings together. We have one meeting that is a requirement for the house. The entire house goes to that meeting. Other than that, they're able to pick and choose their meetings. And sometimes, you know, a woman will be having a difficult time and another woman will say, hey, I'm going to this meeting, you're coming with me. So they provide all kinds of support. There's sometimes issues with child custody and divorce and family issues, and they provide a shoulder for each other to cry on, or to just provide support, or sometimes even advice, because you know, maybe one person's in one stage of their process and another person's in a different stage, and they can say, hey, I got through this and this is how I did it.
And how do you effectively maintain the rules of the house, which would be those limitations on how their interactions have to remain, and maintaining, for example, the person decides they don't want to make their bed, you know, so how do you maintain that sense of organization? When
a young lady decides that she wants to come live at the house, I'm very upfront and let them know these are the rules. You have to do X, Y, and Z. You have to make up your bed. You have to go to 4 meetings a week. I'm not going to choose what meetings you go to or what fellowship you go to, but you have to go. You have chores you must do, a daily chore and a weekly chore to keep the house in a running and to keep it together. And I let them know that you can be written up. I do write-ups. I first try to do a verbal warning. If the verbal warning doesn't work, we do a write-up. And I make it very clear that in order to maintain everyone's sobriety and keep everyone moving forward, that if you decide you don't want to do these things, then you just can't stay at this house. And it's never anything personal. I have had times where I've had to end or terminate a contract. The women sign contracts to come to the house and terminate a contract for them to be at the house because they haven't wanted to follow the rules, because it's about the cohesion of the entire group and taking care of everyone and everyone having the same goal and working towards the same goal. And if you don't want to be a part of that, then you can't stay at the house. And I'm very clear about that.
Mm-hmm. And let's talk about your success rate. How is it working? What's going on with the women that are in your care that are at Nikki's house? How's that progressing?
Well, I think, as most people know, that of the people who are struggling with alcohol and drug addiction, 10% seek some sort of help, and of that 10%, another 10% is usually successful. I have had a higher success rate than that. In the year and a half that we've been open, I would say that we probably have a success rate of about 50-50. We've had women go on to vocational school. I have one young lady who I just adore. She was one of the first women in our house, and she went on and got her license to be a manicurist and pedicurist, and she comes back and she does free manicures and pedicures, or cheaper manicures and pedicures for the young ladies in the house. We've had women go on and they go back to school. We have one woman who is actually working on getting her CDCA, Certified Drug and Addiction Counselor certification. So we've had some pretty good success stories in the house.
Nice. Well, let's talk a little bit about your journey and how what led to Nikki's house and whatever, and how this all began for you.
So when I was in college, I had a drinking problem. I think I had the gene. One whole half side of my family, very much a lot of alcoholics, but very functional, very successful people, but we still had the issue of alcoholism in the family. And I said that I never wanted to be like them. But then I had my first drink, and I really thought, this is no big deal. And like a lot of people who have that gene, I had a very high tolerance. And once I reached that tolerance, then I felt a peace, a calm that had come over me that I had never felt before. And I spent the next 15 years chasing that specific high. And when I was in college, I realized that it was a problem, and I said to myself, I distinctly remember saying to myself in my dorm room, you know, I'm an alcoholic, but I'm not going to do anything about it until I turn 40. Because I felt that all fun would cease. I would not have fun anymore if I got sober. I would be boring, I would be, you know, sad and nothing to do. So I kind of made that conscious decision. And as time went on, I worked in corporate America. I had a job actually that supported my alcoholism in a lot of ways because of the nature of the business. I realized that something needed to change. And so I got a therapist, and my therapist said to me, I can't help you with your problems until you get clean and sober. And I said, if you help me with my problems, then I'll get clean and sober.
Nice bargaining.
Yes.
Yeah, nice bargaining there.
And actually, my first 12-step meeting was a meeting for me to prove to her that I was not an alcoholic or an addict. And I went to my first meeting and I said, you know, my name is Nicole and I do X, Y, and Z, alcohol, drugs, whatever, and do you think I'm an alcoholic? And the woman said, keep coming back. And I was like, why can't anyone answer my question? So I kept going to meetings, and as I started to go to meetings, my thought process on alcohol and drugs started to change drastically, and I couldn't enjoy getting drunk as much as I used to because I had some recovery floating around in my head. So I eventually decided to take the plunge, and I got sober and started going to meetings, and I've been sober since September the 29th of 2006.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
So once you became sober, you had a sense that there was something that you could do for others. Let's talk about how that journey for you developed and how Nikki's house came to be.
So once I got sober, I realized that there were things that I had always wanted to do, but I had kind of put them on the back burner. One of them was going to medical school. But at the same time, I also knew that I wanted to provide some kind of support for patients who were struggling with alcohol and drug addiction. And I noticed that there was a gap. So I went on to get my master's in healthcare administration and management. And then I went on to medical school and I did a dual MD MBA program. And then
it's a challenge.
It was very hard, particularly because I was an older student. And what complicated it even more was that my father was very ill. He had congestive heart failure. So at any given point in time, I would wake up in the morning, start my day as a medical student, and end my day in the hospital with him and sleep in the Cleveland Clinic with him for 3-4 weeks at a time. And eventually he passed away, unfortunately, last year, and I inherited his house. And it's a beautiful house. It's in a beautiful neighborhood in Howland, which is right outside of Warren. And I said to myself, you know, I really want to do something with this house other than just sell it or just rent it. And I talked about it with my mom, I talked about it with my family, and I decided that I was going to take this house and turn it into a recovery house. And so we have 8 beds, and that's how Nikki's house came into being.
How do young people come to, how do people come to Nikki's house? What is the process by which you recruit them to become part of your community?
So I've developed relationships with many of the recovery centers in and around the area of Warren, Youngstown, Rock Creek, Ashtabula, and so forth. And I've also developed relationships with some probation officers in different areas around the surrounding counties. So often they will refer a young lady to me, at which point I interview them, and in the interview process I ask them and make very clear these are our rules, these are our expectations, and most importantly I want to know, do you have an honest desire to change your life? I do realize that relapse is often a part of recovery, even though it's not a requirement of recovery. So I try to work with everyone And mostly the women that come to my house are through referrals from either probation or through a recovery center.
And the timeline, the time frame that these folks are with you at Nikki's house, is there an end time? Do they stay as long as they like? Do you work through them on a project for what's going to be the next step after Nikki's house?
Yes. So they can stay there as long as they want. I had one person stay as long as 6 months. We've had someone stay as long as a month. They were just trying to get themselves situated. But I don't have a limit on the amount of time that they want to. They can stay as long as they want to stay and follow the rules. Often, the longer someone stays, the more responsibility they get in the house. And they like that. And because I use the ones that have been there longer as encouragement to everyone else.
Sure.
Yeah, they can stay as long as they like.
Let's talk a bit about what you see from your perspective of the difficulty for people who are in recovery to find employment, to rejoin. So much of what builds self-respect is employment, having money, having the ability to manage your schedule so that you can go to work and come home and have beginnings of a life.
So that is a huge challenge, and what we've done is I've also developed some relationships with various organizations that help women with reentry. I have worked with some organizations that help with something as simple as fines. You know, they're maybe not able to get a job because they can't get a driver's license, and they can't get a driver's license because they have some fines that need to be taken care of. So I've worked with and sent them to organizations that will help them pay off these fines. There's some women who maybe didn't even finish high school, and I've worked with some organizations that have provided GED support. And in some cases, one young lady who's currently at our house now, she's not just getting a GED, she's getting an actual high school diploma.
No.
Yeah, there's a couple of organizations that we work with who help with vocational training and help with placement after that. I just started working with another organization that helps women who might not be able to get a job because they have records and so forth, and they work with the expungement process, or they work on how to get around it, or work on ways to provide jobs that to them, or guide them to jobs where their record would not, be an issue. So we've done that. I've also started to develop some relationships with some of the employers in and around the area of our house. There's a couple of fast food restaurants where I know the managers, and I've been able to talk to them and say, hey, look, I've started this house. I have these young ladies, they're in recovery, they're trying to change their lives. Could you give them a chance? And we've been able to get several girls placed in those places also.
So let's talk about the future a little bit. First of all, the future for Nikki's house. It's one house. Do you have thoughts that it would grow to another level, or is this something that the focus that you have now with the numbers of women that you're working with is the right level for you?
So I want to do something small well versus something huge not so well. So there's a lot of houses that have tons and tons of women in them. Our house is fairly large and could probably hold 3 times the capacity that we have. But I don't want to do that because I want to make sure that I give each woman some individual attention. So in that regard, I'm comfortable where we are, and I want to grow into that and provide maximum support for what we have. As far as expanding and having other houses for Nikki's in a group like some people do, I'm not ready for that, but I also believe in the guidance of my higher power. So, 20 years ago, if someone asked me whether I would be a grateful member of a 12-step program, which I am truly grateful to have the principles of that 12-step program, and said to me, that, you know, you weren't going to be a neurosurgeon or, you know, whatever, and you'd want to go into psychiatry and work with addicts, I would have laughed at you. So, but my higher power guided me to this journey, and this is where I am. So I won't say, I don't know. It depends on what my higher power guides me to do.
Mm-hmm. But you have the confidence in yourself that you can take a direction that is going to reward you as well as provide service to others.
Yes, absolutely.
Nicole W. of Nikki's House in Warren, Ohio, thank you so much for joining us today at Rock and Recovery.
Thank you. I'm glad to have been here.